Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Scott Groves with the On the Edge podcast. I'm here with my friend Kurt, and Kurt's an interesting soul, man. He's just a good old boy from New Orleans, retired like 11 years ago at 35 years old, has about $10 million in real estate underneath his management, a bunch of duplexes in New Orleans, some short-term rentals in Florida. Really one of these people who just piece by piece created his own financial safety net and his own passive income stream very early in life, which is pretty fascinating. And we're actually doing this interview from his car with a background because he's also got 4 kids under 7. So right now on the East Coast, bedtime's a bit of a shit show for Kurt, but recently relocated to Florida based on all the craziness that's going on with the pandemic, still looking for other investment opportunities, starting to do some property syndication. So kind of been a theme of the show the last couple episodes of like finding this financial freedom, investing in properties, finding passive income. So Kurt, first of all, thank you for being on the show. And what did I miss in our little 30-second Reader's Digest bio?
Yeah, that was great. I was born and raised in New Orleans, just moved to the Florida Panhandle. Right a couple months after COVID started, I knew that New Orleans was going to go insane with COVID. My wife and I knew that was going to happen, and we were right. And we had a vacation house over here in on the beach, and we decided to move here permanently. So been here ever since. So it's been great. Been a great move for us.
And by the way, what kind of wife do you have that you can say, hey, honey, wife and 4 kids under, at that time, 5 or 6 years old, let's just completely transplant our life, leave friends, family, support system, and let's move to one of the rental beach houses because, you know, that'll be fun to move a family of 6. Like, what kind of saint did you marry?
Yeah, she was great. Luckily, she's actually not from New Orleans originally. She's from Kansas originally. So she didn't have her parents there and everything. So it was a little bit easier for her. My parents are still there and everything. So, but what was funny was she was the one that, you know, was questioning moving. Cause I'd been willing to move the last 3 years, but, finally when COVID hit, she was like, okay, it's time. I know they're going to go nuts with this over there and Florida's going to be a lot better. So that really pushed her over the edge.
Nice. And, you know, at the time we're filming this in January of 2022. We'll probably be a couple months on the release schedule because for the first time ever, we're ahead of schedule on the podcast. So, you know, looking back in time, almost 2 years, March, April, May of 2020, it was not a foregone conclusion that this was going to kind of separate right down the middle of political lines. It still kind of shocks me that this is like a red state versus blue state type of thing when it should really just be, you know, actual math, science, disease, things of that nature. What was it about your foresight that you just knew kind of intrinsically, Louisiana is going to lock down and be a little bit less freedom. Florida is going to be a little bit more freedom? Because kudos to you to seeing that. But everybody that says they saw that, they didn't really see that. There was no foregone conclusions in April or May of 2020 on kind of where was going to be free states and where was going to lock down like the, you know, communist capital of California. So what was the mindset, or how did you see that coming?
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say I was positive about it, but I just had a gut instinct because I lived in New Orleans my entire life for 44 years. So I know exactly how the politicians operate down there. And in the Florida Panhandle where I am, it's probably the most conservative place in the country, maybe outside of, you know, Idaho or West Texas or something like
Right.
that. So I just knew the reaction was going to be much more muted than it is in New Orleans, because New Orleans in the last 15 years has gradually shifted to trying to be a combination of Portland and Detroit, which is not a good combination in my opinion.
Right.
And I don't know. We just saw the writing on the wall. I don't know. We just felt it. We knew they were going to be nuts about it, and we chose wisely. And luckily, we had bought a bunch of real estate right before it happened, and then, you know, real estate exploded over here. So it really jacked up my net worth as well, which was a blessing.
Nice. And, you know, I'm trying to square that formula in my head, and maybe you are too, where it's like, I so venomously disagree with the politics in Los Angeles, California, or most of California overall. I think things are poorly mismanaged. I think the homeless situation, just all the powers that be are conspiring to make the once great state of California shitty. And yet, I work in the mortgage industry. Property values are just continuing to go up. There's not enough supply. There's too much demand. There's always people that want to move to California, no matter maybe what the societal problems might be, because people fit in societally with what they're trying to do, either progressively or in the entertainment industry or the tech industry. Like, how do you square that in your mind? Like, oh, I think this city is doing everything wrong and I'm super frustrated. And then when I look at my balance sheet, I'm up 25% in my real estate value. I can't square that in my head, and it makes me sometimes feel like a hypocrite. Like, do you square that in your head, or do you not even think about it? Or am I just like the only freak that can't figure out my own political views plus net worth views? It's like, it's a weird situation.
Yeah, it's totally weird. And I tell people that all the time, because my rentals in New Orleans, whenever I put an ad up for an apartment I have, the demand has actually been crazy in the last like 9 months. And I do not understand it, because the murder rate's gone up a ton. They've had everything closed. You gotta show a vaccine passport to go buy a cup of coffee. And people are still moving there. And I don't understand it. I think it's just a certain type of person that is moving there. And people like you and me are probably moving out of those places, but a lot of people that agree with that stuff are moving in. That's the only way that I can explain it. Yeah. And I think the whole country is becoming that way. I think we're starting to vote with our feet, and the whole country is going to start to become balkanized in just different regions. Yeah. And I mean, it's always kind of been like that a little bit, but I think it's just going to increase, and it's just going to be, that is just going to be our future, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the reasons we've been spending more time at our second home up here in Henderson is, one, I have a family member that had some challenges, and not worth going into, but we just came up here to be a little bit closer. But then also, like 6 months into COVID, we're looking around, working from home, Zoom, email, hadn't seen a referral partner of mine in 6 months. And my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, dude, we could have been in Cabo this whole time. Like, we could have just been, working remotely and then drinking Mai Tais and eating ceviche every night down on the pier. And we felt kind of silly that we hadn't taken advantage of that. But we were, trying to be responsible and figure out what all the science was going to lead to. And then we were like, screw it, man. We can spend a lot more time at our other house up in Nevada and, kind of Airbnb, one of the two. So, yeah, kind of crazy how everything has worked out and how much COVID has accelerated the push to work from home.
Yeah, and I wanted to address a point you made earlier, that I was actually shocked that it got back. I shouldn't have been shocked, but at how political it got, because at the beginning, pretty much everybody was like, okay, let's shut everything down for a couple of weeks. Not many people were arguing against that. Like, let's give it a couple of weeks and shut it all down. And, some of those things scared me a little bit, because we didn't know whether there was going to be a 5% death rate or whether it was going to be, whatever it really is, which I don't even think any of us really know what the actual death of COVID rate is.
Right.
But man, it got political fast, and it's sad to see, but I think that's just the way it is. And the media just makes it worse. And it's the hyperbole that, they exaggerate the things they want to exaggerate, and they don't talk about the things they don't want to talk about. And it's sad. I mean, it was like that with, the Black Lives Matter stuff. It was like that with COVID. It's just, it's like that with everything nowadays. Yeah. If they think it's important, they're going to talk about it every single second of the day. If it's something that, they don't want to talk about, they're just not going to talk about it. They're just going to ignore it.
Yeah, 100%. And, it's funny, you mentioned everybody kind of being in agreement at the beginning. I was willing to give anybody, Trump, Biden running against him, Gavin Newsom, the governor from Michigan, the governor from Florida, Dr. Fauci, Rand Paul. I was willing to give everybody a pass until about June or July of 2020. It's like, hey, we were dealing with a new thing. We didn't know. Clearly, you're going to get misinformation out of China, so who knows what the real story is. So it's like every politician, every public official, every health official, I'm like, hey, give people the benefit of the doubt until we got to about June or July, when the people that were paying attention we're saying then what now kind of the media is starting to buy onto is like, oh, well, it looks like everybody's going to get COVID and the death rate is really low, but everybody's going to kind of get it eventually. So mitigate where you can, protect the elderly or those with, morbidly obese, diabetic, plus respiratory problems. Yeah, those people are in bad shape if they get COVID. But I started to feel around probably June or July, okay, gave everybody a pass for 3 or 4 months because nobody really knew what was going on. And now everything's just wildly politicized. And it's funny. I don't know if you saw those.
I think it might have started with the Black Lives Matter riots, protests and riots, when the media just gave them a complete pass. Everybody else had to stay inside and not gather and do anything. But when all that stuff happened, it was like, okay, that's way more important than a disease, than a virus that's going to kill all of us, supposedly.
Yeah.
Just let them do their thing, gather in tight groups, tens of thousands of people, and they didn't even try to stop it or care about it. And then, all of us on my side of the aisle were like, you got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. Like, what is the deal?
Yeah.
I think that's when it really started.
You're so right. Because once those 1,200 doctors and health professionals signed on to say, they signed this blanket letter saying that, systematic racism is a greater public threat than COVID. And that's why we're kind of, supporting the BLM movement and the marches and whatnot. I was like, oh, these are 1,200 very smart people that aren't going to sign their name publicly to a bunch of pandemic death warrants. They know in their heart of hearts, this thing is not as contagious or deadly or dangerous as they're making it out to be. And I agree with you. That's when I was kind of like, hey, whatever you feel about the Black Lives Matter protests, which I think were in good faith, which then led to riots, which were obviously not in good faith. The fact that the doctors were willing to come out and talk about that, it was like, oh, okay, well now the cat's kind of out of the bag. We know what's going on here.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think that's when it started.
And, I want to circle back real quick because you had mentioned you'd acquired some properties right before the pandemic, which was accidentally great timing. Again, anybody who thought they knew that property values were going to go up, 20% during a pandemic, they're lying to us. But I know you bought some new properties. You managed some stuff long term. You mentioned having a lot of tenants and a lot of tenant demand, but you also managed some shorter term Airbnb stuff. Could you maybe talk through, for those people that are thinking about becoming property investors, or maybe they're going down a certain path, could you talk a little bit about the Airbnb versus long-term hold and long-term tenant? I guess I should say short-term tenant, long-term tenant. Can you talk through whatever you've discovered on that, either the math, the profitability, the headache or lack thereof? Can you talk a little bit about the difference? Because we've had some people on that specialize in Airbnb. We've had some people that specialize in property syndication, but it seems like you're straddling the fence in this great spot where you've got some short-term rentals and some long-term rentals.
Yeah, I like both. There's pros and cons to each one. Long-term tenants, I feel like it's more stable income. It's kind of like getting a paycheck, your normal paycheck week to week. And short-term rentals are more like, getting a monthly bonus. I feel like, like if you're in sales, if you got a salary plus bonus, your long-term tenants are kind of like your salary, and your short-term tenants are kind of like your monthly bonus. The management of it, man, it really depends. Sometimes, I have some long-term tenants that I have not even talked to them for years, ever, just because I've gotten lucky and haven't had any maintenance issues, and they don't really bother me and I don't bother them, and they just pay their rent, and I haven't talked to them or seen them in forever. I mean, I had one tenant just moved out. I didn't see her for 13 years, literally physically didn't see her. And I would drive by that house a decent amount of times. I just never had a reason to go in the apartment, and I physically did not see her for 13 years while she lived in my apartment. And then short-term rentals, it's the same type of thing. Most of them are awesome. You don't hear from them. They check in, they check out. You don't hear from them. Everything goes well. And then some of them are a nightmare. We had one in Colorado last week that, brought their dog. We had a no pet policy. They left dog crap on the floor. They smoked cigars in the house. We had a no smoking policy. And, that was really aggravating. But most short-term tenants are great as well. It's just a totally different business, and I like both. And for me, it makes me feel good to have both. If I just had all one or another, short-term rentals are more profitable typically, when everything's going well. I have not gone through like a bad recession in the short-term rental market. So I don't know how that would play out. That would make me a little nervous. Long-term rentals, people still need a place to live, even if the economy's in a recession. Some people might move back with their parents or might get more roommates, things like that. But for the most part, you're probably not going to lose all your tenants in a recession in the long-term market. But short-term market, you might struggle a little bit.
Yeah. And is there a different type of property that you're acquiring for long-term versus short-term?
Yes, I don't. I deal in the higher end, I'd say, short-term rental market. We're not renting places for $50 a night. My stuff is usually, at least $400 a night, $400 to $1,000 a night. So they're nice. They're nicer places. Usually better guests, but I mean, they expect the place to be, extremely clean and nice and, have everything in order. Um, and my long-term rentals, same thing. I don't do Section 8. I've done a little bit of that in the past, and I just feel like life's too short for that. I just didn't want to deal with it
Too
anymore.
much headache, right?
Yeah. So, in New Orleans, my average rent is, $1,300 $1,400 a month, which is, that's a good, you're attracting a pretty good tenant at that price point
Right.
in New Orleans.
And speaking, let's go pre-pandemic because property values are out of control. I don't think there's going to be a bubble, and I don't think there's going to be some major crash. But speaking pre-pandemic, I know your sweet spot has been like acquiring duplexes, renting out each side for $1,300, kind of having a hedge. If a tenant moves out, you've at least got half the mortgage covered. If you were looking at $1,300 each side of a duplex, so $2,600 a month in rent, what were kind of the economics of like the sweet spot of property value versus down payment versus monthly, all in costs for the property? What were you looking for pre-pandemic to be profitable? What do those numbers on a duplex kind of look like?
In New Orleans, I was pretty much looking for 1% rule. So, if I'm getting $2,600, I'd like to be in around $260,000 or something like that. Some places we were building new construction and they were really nice, and we might be in at 300,000. So we get a little bit less than the 1% rule, but we would have like no maintenance because they were new places. So, and that's really hard to get now. I mean, in New Orleans or anywhere. So, I've not found much to buy. I'm actually not looking to buy New Orleans going forward for a while,
Right.
but I couldn't find those deals now anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And where do you think the return is going to come from for, forward reaching? Because obviously, in inflation, we can't just have everything in cash. So there's probably additional assets you have to buy at some point in the future just to keep up with, inflation, cost of living, expenses for you and your growing family, and putting 4 kids through college is not going to be cheap. So where do you think you're going to, see the return on investment in the future? Are you waiting for inflation to catch up and then maybe acquire new properties? Or are you of the mindset that there's going to be some type of downturn and you can pick up assets cheap? Or are you branching out into buying, gold and crypto? Like where are you thinking about deploying money in the future?
Well, first of all, I hope my kids don't go to college. Second of all, not for the money reason, for a bunch of other reasons.
Right.
But luckily right now I have a few lots that I'm going to build some short-term rentals here in Florida with. So for the next few years, I'm going to have my money tied up doing that. I've been putting some money in crypto every week, just 3/4 Bitcoin, 25% Ethereum. I'm not a huge crypto guy, but I want to be in the game. I didn't get in early, so
Right.
I'm not crypto rich or anything. I have, some money in gold. I think it actually probably is a decent time to buy gold since it's one of the assets that went down last year, but I don't have enough to like, that it's going to move the needle for me at all.
Right.
But going forward, I'm going to develop the properties that I have and then kind of reassess from there. I invest in some syndication deals. So I like multifamily apartment deals in growing markets in the South and the West.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly Florida, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Arizona. I like those types of areas and multifamily apartment rentals. I mean, those deals, you get a lot of people saying they're too frothy,
Right.
but I've still been investing in some of them.
Yeah, we had, I know you're familiar with him, Andrew Cushman on from Vantage Point. He came on and did a great talk on property syndication. So for anybody who's interested in what property syndication is, which basically means you get a small piece of a 30, 40, 50, $100 million apartment complex, you make some dividends, you get some tax write-offs. Anybody interested in that, we'll put the link below. Chris will link that up to Andrew's talk on syndication because he's one of the best operators I've met as far as like return on investments, but also just the down-to-earth quality, the like honesty, the humbleness. I love him. I would probably invest with him over other people, even if there was a slightly inferior return due to the trust level.
Yeah, I'm actually in one of his deals in Fort Walton Beach, which is about 30 minutes from where I am right now. I should have put a lot more money into it because I knew how much this area was growing.
Right.
And sure enough, that deal's done incredible. And he's an awesome guy. He's an ex-engineer. Yeah, he's one of those guys that, investing with engineers is probably usually a smart strategy because they know the numbers.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, being a lifelong resident of New Orleans, which is pretty liberal, progressive spot, and then moving to Panhandle, Florida, where you said one of the most conservative spots you can imagine, we're kind of going through a little bit of the same culture shock as we spend about half the year in Henderson, Nevada, where we're, moving from LA, very, very progressive, which, has some real pluses and, in my opinion, some real minuses. What's been the most shocking thing, good, bad, or indifferent, moving from New Orleans to the Panhandle? And like, what's the good, the bad, and the ugly of relocating?
Well, it's a complicated question because the New Orleans I grew up in, I feel like is not the same New Orleans as it is now. Like I grew up in a traditional Catholic city of New Orleans. And it's just not that city anymore. It's like I said before, it's kind of like a Portland and Detroit. It's gotten very, very progressive. Anti-religion, just, it was never like a Republican city, and
Right.
I would never claim that at all, but it had its traditions, it had traditional values. It was kind of a blue dog Democrat city. And now it's woke. I mean, that's the only word you can say. I mean, it's
Right.
woke. And, it's still got its, ghetto qualities. I mean, we still have one of the highest murder rates in the country that we've had for a long time. It was going down a lot after Katrina, but it's been ticking back up for the last 7 years, and that's not good. A lot of violent crime. I know multiple people that have been carjacked just in the last 2 months. Oof. And it's just one of those cities, that when you visit, you're probably not going to be the victim of violent crime, but you could be. No one would be surprised if it happened to you. And you always have to have your head on a swivel. It's just the truth. Yeah. You're going to have a great time. Like New Orleans is a fun town. It's an awesome town. Like if you're going to have fun, it's one of the funnest cities in the country, if not the funnest. But you got to watch out. You got to watch where you are. You got to watch, if you're drunk, stumbling down the street in the French Quarter, 2 a.m. by yourself, you better watch out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I think you could say that about. I think you should say that about any city in America, where it's like you just probably should not be, drunk, totally unaware of your surroundings, stumbling around a weird town at 2:00 in the morning. I would say the same thing about Beverly Hills.
yeah, you're right. Well, here nothing would happen to you. I mean, that's the difference between here. Like I'm sitting in my car in a parking lot, and it's dark at night. Like I have zero fear that anyone possibly would come up to my car and try to rob me or carjack me. Like, it would not happen ever.
Right.
Like, there's no crime here. There, like, nobody even thinks about crime here. If something does happen, which, occasionally something will happen, it is just the biggest news, and the cops just like will not stop till they find those people. Like, it's crazy. Like, when something does happen, I mean, they had, I think there was a carjacking like 20 minutes from my house, like a year and a half ago. And the guys were from out of town, and they tracked these guys through the woods with like dogs, and they like shut down highways, and like, man, they like, they went after these guys for like 24 straight hours till they found them. It was nuts. I was like, yes. In New Orleans, like, it would be on the news for like 2 seconds, and then nobody would ever remember it again. They would never catch the guys. They'd probably never prosecute them. They'd let them out of jail the next day. They would never go to jail for a long period of time. Like, nobody would care.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And
that's one of the differences.
the sad thing is, and we're seeing this across the nation with the defund the police movement, and I hate to say it, but wealthier, primarily Caucasian, ultra progressives telling people in the inner city what's best for them. And it's like, when you go through these motions of like defund the police, and you take other measures, like in LA, where they will no longer prosecute you for a crime unless you steal more than $950, and loitering and prostitution, and public not arrest, public disturbances. They've openly told the cops, don't go after any of these small crimes. Well, guess what?
Right.
Those people that commit small crimes become big criminals. And they're not doing it in Beverly Hills. They're doing it in the areas where the people are the most vulnerable and tend to be the most challenged socioeconomically. So it's like, it's super easy if you live in Brentwood or Beverly Hills behind a gated compound with private security, with the best local police force in the country. It's really easy for those people to be like, oh yeah, we're totally safe. You don't have to prosecute for these small crimes and whatnot. And then it actually hurts the people they're claiming to want to help. It's so infuriating for me. And I don't even look at it as like a Democrat Republican thing. I look at it as like an ignorance versus like socioeconomically challenged thing. It just blows my mind, bro.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, I've lived in really tough neighborhoods in New Orleans. That was one of my business models when I first started. I would go buy a house in a terrible neighborhood, and I would go live there, and I'd renovate the house and live there for a few years, and then move on to another house. So I've been in these really bad neighborhoods, and there's a lot of really good people in tough neighborhoods, and man, they hate criminals worse than anybody, because like you said, they have to deal with them. They have to pick up the litter. They have to like hear the gunshots. Good people in bad neighborhoods, they hate criminals. So like, yeah, you're victimizing them by letting these people out. And it's a shame. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. So, going back to the property investment, and I feel like you and I could jive on politics or property all night long, but what was it about you in your 20s and early 30s that said, or had the training, or had the foresight, or read the right book, or had the parental influence to be like, you know what? I don't want to just work whatever you worked, oil rigs in New Orleans my whole life. I want to own property, become financially solvent, replace all my income with passive income, buy a duplex in a rough neighborhood, then move to another duplex, cash flow that, move to another duplex. Like, that's not the normal path for 20 and 30-year-olds. Usually we don't figure out this financial shit until we're so late in life that we can't get the compounding effect on our side. So what was unique about you that you knew you wanted to do this from a really young age?
So when I was little, I always had little tidbit businesses. I would collect aluminum cans. I would, sell garbage pail kid cards to my friends at school. I just had these little things that I would do. They weren't really businesses, but I just always kind of liked that type of stuff. Really didn't start till college though. I was studying finance at college, but I wasn't big on going to class. And I remember a Barnes and Noble opened up in Baton Rouge, where I was at LSU at the time. And it was the first I had ever heard of Barnes and Nobles. So I went and checked it out, and I was like, man, this place is awesome. They've got all these books, and you can just sit here and buy a cup of coffee and like
read books and magazines all day. So I would go to Barnes and Nobles every day instead of my classes. I would get a cup of coffee and I would sit there and read magazines and books all day. And what I would read was business magazines, and I would read a lot of like get rich books, like how to invest in real estate, how to invest in the stock market. And, you know, that really appealed to me. Like, working at something where eventually I would not have to work anymore. Cause I love that idea. I love the idea of being wealthy and I would have the option whether to work or not. So I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So that's when the seeds were really planted in my head. Read Rich Dad Poor Dad, bunch of different books like that. And then when I became a financial advisor after college, became a CFP, a certified financial planner. And I bought my first duplex in 2003. So I was 25 at the time. And I rented out the other apartment for $900 a month. And my note was, I think, $830 a month. So I was like, man, this is awesome. They're paying my entire mortgage plus, $67. I'm like, why is everyone not doing this? It boggled my mind. I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what am I seeing?
Yeah.
Because why doesn't every person do this? Because New Orleans has tons of duplexes. And none of my friends were doing it at the time. And I thought it was crazy. So I bought that first one and I basically lived for free. And then I just started buying, one or two a year after that. That was the time when banks were just giving loans to anyone. I had, a negative net worth. They were loaning me money to buy properties. I don't know why, but so that's how it started.
And then how do you weather the storm, right? Because fast forward to 2009, you own how many properties?
So 2009, so I deciphered, a lot of people in the real estate investing game decipher everything, where like 2008 was the demarcation moment.
Right.
But for me, I lived in New Orleans. So 2005, when Katrina hit, was my demarcation moment. So when Katrina hit in 2005, I think I had 3 duplexes, which would have been 6 units. But in 2009, I probably would have had like 12 or 14 units by then.
Yeah. And was it the positive cash flow that kept you alive? Because I've heard this story many times that ends with, oh yeah, I lost everything in 2009, went bankrupt, spent the next 10 years of my life, digging out of debt. And now I'm trying to do it over again. But, I missed 10 years of like good property valuation increase. So what was it about Katrina? And like you hit a double whammy, right? You hit Katrina, probably had to do a lot of water damage repair. And then you hit 2009 where the world freezes up, credit markets freeze up, all of a sudden banks want their money back. How did you survive that double whammy and keep moving down the path of, retiring at 35 years old with rental income?
So first of all, I lucked out with Katrina. My properties did not flood in Katrina, and I didn't have any major damage. I had some damage, nothing major though. So as soon as the city opened back up, my properties were rented again with higher rents because there was no housing around. So I actually did pretty well in Katrina. Some of my relatives did not. I actually lost my great grandmother in the hurricane. She passed away in the hurricane. And then, but what Katrina did was we didn't have that big bubble. So 2008 didn't really affect the New Orleans housing market too much. We had a slight downturn, but we didn't go down 30-40% like some markets. We might have gone down 5%. So I was buying that whole time. And actually the best times to buy in New Orleans were probably around 2010 and 11, because that's when like all the kind of bottom feeding vultures that came after Katrina, they were already gone. They had already been wiped out in the 2008 crash. And now it's just local investors. And a lot of people have been scared out of real estate. They had so many horror stories from all across the country. People were terrified to buy real estate. So, and I had already had a few years of experience. I was like, this is great. I've never lost money doing it. So I kept buying. And I had a business partner and we were buying and buying and buying. So that's where we made a lot of our money, because we were some of the only people buying in 2010 and 11. There's one funny story. We had a house that was listed for $9,500, and my business partner and I,
wait, you bought a house for $9,000?
No, it was listed for $9,500. It had a lot of hurricane damage, but we said as a joke, we want to buy a house for $1,000. So we offered $1,000, and the seller countered us at $2,500, and we said no. We turned it down, and I think we saw the house sold in the same conditions, sold for like $100,000 5 years later. So we could have 48x'd our money. But we said no, we turned down. So that's how good the deals were back then. We, that was a rare deal. We weren't buying properties for $500, but we turned that property down for $2,500.
That's amazing. Kicking the ass right there, right?
Yeah.
And that property day, obviously, to get it renovated and livable, you would have dropped $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 into the house to redo the whole thing because it had massive hurricane damage. What would that house?
I mean, that was the thing. Like we were gonna, we had a lot. It was a lot of opportunity costs. There were a lot of better deals, and I mean, there was a lot of other properties in better neighborhoods that we could have invested in. We would have to put the same amount of money into this bad neighborhood. But I mean, the play would have been just buy it for $2,500 and sit on it, sell it 5 years later for $100,000.
So let's say you bought that house.
That's
then,
hindsight.
Let's say you bought that house, then put $50,000 into renovating it. What's that house worth today?
Oh, probably be worth, I don't know, $230.
Amazing.
$240, something like that. Yeah.
Amazing. And not that I want anybody to go through the tragedy of a hurricane again. And I really don't want people to go through the tragedy of losing everything a la 2008, 2009. But do you see anything on the horizon that's going to create another buying opportunity in the next cycle or our lifetime? Because I got to be honest, I have this conversation all the time with smarter people than me on the podcast of like, hey, I'm of two minds. One part of my mind is leverage, keep buying assets. The government's pumping, 50% of all the dollars that have been created in the entire system in the last 18 months. Inflation is going to keep pushing values higher and higher and higher, and I should be leveraging and spending my cash and buying assets. That's like 50.01% of my brain. And 49.999% says, we're looking down the barrel at another 2009 in pick a number, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. I should be sitting on as much cash as possible. So when the $2,500 property does become available in Cleveland, Ohio, or Detroit or whatever, I can jump in, redeploy assets and get that 50x, return. So if you're looking at your crystal ball, are you of the, hey, spend all the money we've got, leverage yourself to the 9 and buy more assets because inflation's going to take care of you? Or, oh yeah, man, we want to sit on a lot of dry powder and a lot of cash because 2 years from now, you'll be able to buy the stock market or gold or pork bellies or properties or whatever, relatively cheap. Like where's your mindset at on this?
I think I'm kind of like you. I mean, I call myself, a positive realist. Like I'm not fully, I'm not a sunshine pumper where everything's super positive every day, but I'm not a big negative person either. When I feel like something's negative, I'm gonna be negative about it. But overall, I'm a net positive, but it might only be a 51% positive. So I kind of agree with you. I mean, I think the fact they've printed so much money that having debt and having cash flowing assets, you're probably going to be better off in the long run. And I would stress that cash flowing thing because, I wouldn't go borrow money and buy Bitcoin. You might be better off, but if you're borrowing money at 2% and making 6% and, paying your debt with your rental income, you'll be able to survive any storms that come around. So I would put that caveat in there. As long as you're paying your debt, you're paying your notes, you'll be fine. I wouldn't get over leveraged, but I wouldn't sit on the sidelines either. I mean, the old saying, buy real estate and wait instead of wait and buy real estate. We've had people that have sat on the sidelines the last few years and they've gotten killed because they've done nothing. And I mean, the biggest one, I told my wife the other day, the biggest risk sometimes is not doing anything.
Right.
Not taking a risk sometimes is the risk. So,
I
like
love that,
anything,
man. I love that so much. Buy real estate and wait. Don't wait to buy real estate. Because you're right. If you're cash flowing, even by $1, as long as you're not sinking bad money into a property or any asset, and it's cash flowing, who cares if the market goes plus 50%, negative 70%, plus 20%? Because you've got the asset effectively for free because it's cash flowing.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, something's going to happen. I mean, at some point, we're going to have some type of correction. Is it going to be a crash? Who knows? Anything could happen. Big, terrorist attack, giant hurricane,
giant oil spill, oil spill.
Yellowstone earthquake. I mean, oil spill could be anything. But, who knows when that stuff's going to happen? It could happen 20 years from now. It could happen tomorrow. Nobody knows. So you don't want to be one of those guys that's saying, it's going to crash, it's going to crash, it's going to crash. And then it happens 13 years from now and you tell everybody you were right. Well, you missed out on 12 years of gains.
Right. Right. I mean, we could potentially elect a president who has Alzheimer's and just says crazy stuff to like other foreign leaders. Like something crazy like that could happen.
Yeah. No, I mean, it could happen. It, tells everybody he's going to fix COVID and it's like 800,000 deaths and,
Yeah, you can't fix nature. It's like I remember this.
You can't stop a virus.
Yeah, you can't stop a virus. You can't stop the waves. I remember Dennis Miller had a great like political commentary on this, and he was describing like fighting the waves and being in a doughboy pool where when you're a kid, you want to run in the doughboy pool in circles to get like a little wave tank going, and then you turn around and throw yourselves in the wave. And he's like, the older I get, the more I realize that's just a waste of energy. Eventually, you just got to figure out how to ride the waves. And like, I don't want to just create my own pain. And I'm like, oh, so much of what's going on in the country right now is creating our own pain and like creating a centrifugal force and then trying to run against it. Where really what we should do is like just accept it and kind of ride the wave. And I'll always remember that that Dennis Miller like kind of talking point on creating waves just for the sake of fighting them. It seems silly.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you get older and you look back, when I was young, you just, you believe everything and everything you see on TV, it's just your reality. And now that you get older and you've been through so many things, it's just funny when I turn on the TV and, I just feel like everything's manufactured these days. It's probably always been like that. When they create a crisis, they want to create a crisis because the solutions to their crisis they've created are going to benefit them. It's going to benefit their friends. Are going to benefit them politically. And it's just always, always a crisis, one crisis after another, whether it's, climate change or the insurrection or racism or COVID or, the financial crisis, or what's going to be the next one. I mean, it's just always a crisis. And, there's always some truth in every crisis that they create. There's always some truth there. The George Floyd thing, that was horrible. I mean, it was horrible what happened to that man, but, they used it.
Yeah.
And they do that with everything. I mean, COVID's real, but I mean, are they using hyperbole to create a bigger crisis than what it really is? Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I love that now, again, filming this January 2022, the CDC, who's been pushing one narrative, and the International Health Organization and whatnot, or the World Health Organization, now they're starting to come out and be like, well, yeah, most of the kids that have been hospitalized for COVID, it's also because they were really being hospitalized for a broken leg and they just happened to test positive for COVID. Or they had a horrible, 1 in a million leukemia and then they died with COVID, but did they really die of COVID, And then some stat came out the other day and they were like, well, yeah, if we're being honest, probably 70% of people who were hospitalized because of COVID had 4 comorbidities, because you had diabetes, you were fat, you had a pre-existing respiratory condition, and you had low blood sugar, or I guess diabetes would be either a high or low blood sugar. But, you had 4 things that were already trying to kill you. Well, guess what? The flu, pneumonia, COVID, like something was going to get you. If you were fundamentally flawed as a healthy individual, something was going to get you. And I'm not saying that to downplay the deaths caused by COVID because it's tragic. And I think everybody should be super mad at China. But just the last 2 years of the fear porn, I refuse to buy into it. Like I don't watch regular pornography. I don't want to watch fear pornography.
And the fact that they just never address the actual elephant in the room, and which is the health of the average American citizen, and the obesity epidemic, the fact that we're so sedentary. We don't get outside enough. We don't exercise enough. We don't eat right. I saw a news story in New Orleans yesterday, and they were interviewing a restaurant owner about New Orleans just reinstituted a mask order for indoors, all restaurants and every business. And the guy they were interviewing, he had his mask on. He was the owner of the restaurant, and he was probably 375 pounds. And I just felt bad for the guy because he's sitting there and he's spitting out exactly what he's been told, that mask are what's going to save him or what's going to save everybody else. And he's around 375 pounds and he thinks a mask is going to save him. And to me, that's just sad. Like, it doesn't make me mad at him.
Yeah.
I'm just sad that he's actually bought into that, and that, he doesn't maybe know the real truth that, like, dude, you need to get in shape. Like, it's been 2 years now. Like, if you haven't taken it seriously, like getting yourself in shape, the mask is not going to help you, man. Like, somebody, has nobody told you that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's scary, right? And what a comfort though of like a grand delusion if you are morbidly obese, overweight by 175 pounds. Like, what a great comforting delusion for somebody to say, no, you're fine just the way you are. Just wear this mask. I smoke cigars. One day I might get lip cancer. If somebody told me, no, Scott, every time you smoke a cigar, just eat this Altoid and then that will cleanse your mouth and you have no chance of getting lip cancer. I would want to believe that at such a high level. I would probably have a can of Altoids here to have after every cigar, even though I really knew deep down inside it was bullshit and the Altoid's not doing anything. I would probably still trick myself into doing it because my delusion, my ego, my desire to want to do what I want to do, which is smoke a cigar. Kurt, you could probably convince me that there's some homeopathic remedy out there to not get lip cancer, even though you smoke 2 cigars a day. I'd probably trick myself into doing it because I want to believe, right? And that's when you look around. That's when yeah, you're right. It's not anger. It's like, it's really like sadness. I feel bad.
Yeah, we all get sucked into it. I mean, that's our medical industry, our healthcare industry is, don't do the hard things. Here, pop the pill. Pop the Pfizer pill, pop the, do the surgery, don't do the hard work, do the easy thing. And that's your solution.
Yeah.
Because, nobody, I was just in the last year is when I really looked into like fasting. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, like, why have I never really heard much about fasting outside of like religious purposes? And this year I was like, because there's no money in it. Nobody can make money telling you not to eat something.
Right.
Because even the vitamin companies, they're telling you to take supplements, take vitamins, but when you fast, you don't eat anything. Nobody can make money off of that. So of course nobody's going to talk about it. Nobody makes $1 off of that.
Yeah. Yeah. The Mormons and the Muslims got it right, man. They have like religiously instituted fasting into their religious traditions. And you know, I would be willing to bet, I could be wrong here, but I would be willing to bet if you took a cross section of secular Americans versus devout Mormons versus devout Muslims, I would be willing to bet the Muslims and the Mormons are more biologically healthy than just a normal cross section of American secularists that don't have any religious beliefs. Because, like, you know, whether you agree or disagree with their religion, they've got some interesting checkpoints built in where you take care of your mental and physical health. And it's all free. Like, prayer is free. Yeah, you know,
fasting and no alcohol helps too.
Yeah, no alcohol, free. No smoking, free. No fasting, prayer, which is effectively meditation. I hate people that are like, ooh, there's this new fancy thing called meditation that's going to clear my mind and make me a better person. I'm like, oh, you mean prayer? And I'm not even a religious guy. Like, I don't believe in prayer or meditation, but they're like, it's this scientific breakthrough that if you spend 10 minutes in the morning and spend 10 minutes in the evening, just like reflecting and showing gratitude and having deep thoughts about your life. I'm like, you mean prayer?
Yeah.
And then I get yelled at by all the gurus who are like, no, it's not prayer, it's meditation. I'm like, oh, it seems like the same thing to me.
Yeah. Or just go walk in a forest. I mean, that helps too.
Yeah. My cigar smoking alone, when I like listen to a podcast, that's my form of meditation. So, hey man, going into 2022, and maybe there's not a whole lot you're looking forward to because you're already living in a state where things are effectively free and there's no masks and you're happy to live your life. But is there something in 2022 that you're looking forward to getting back to, or something on the horizon personally, professionally, financially, that you're like, man, I'm really looking forward to crushing it in this area, or this thing getting back to normal?
Well, fortunately, we've been almost totally normal here where I live. And people say Florida in general, but South Florida, I mean, you'll walk around and you see a bunch of people with masks on in South Florida. This part of Florida, people will look at you weird if you wear a mask. So it's this is the spot. So we've been pretty normal since about June 2020. And that's why I go off in New Orleans so much, because when I just drive 4 hours west to my hometown, it's like going to another planet, like literally. Like if you don't wear a mask somewhere, people look at you like you just murdered their family. But to answer your question, 2020, I'm making it a big fitness year. Like I'm starting off the year doing 90 straight Orange Theory workouts. I just rejoined Orange Theory. I used to do that years ago. So I'm trying to get in like really good physical shape. It's hard for me to kind of just get out there and run on my own. So like Orange Theory gives me stimulation to get out there and get into good running shape. And then really, I mean, my kids are so young. I have 4 kids under 7.
Ooh.
Just spending a lot of time with them because, I know, maybe in 5-6 years, my son might not want to hang out with me. He might want to just hang out with his friends. So like, there's only this short window where the kids actually like are going to be excited to be around us.
Yeah.
So I want to enjoy that as much as possible. Financially, like I don't have huge financial goals because, for me to say like, hey, I want to be worth $50 million, $100 million. Like, I feel like I would have to give up their childhood to do that. So I'm not willing to do that. So for me, like at this point in my life, I'm financially independent. I only want my net worth to go up around 10% a year. If it goes up 10% a year, I'm extremely happy. That means it'll double every 7.2 years. So, I don't have extreme goals like that because I don't think my lifestyle would change that much if I was worth $50 million. I don't think I'd want to own a plane. I probably wouldn't want to deal with it. I don't even care about owning a Tesla. I like having just a pickup truck. I might want a Rivian.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, that's kind of my goals. 10 net worth go up 10% a year. Really fit this year, and spend a ton of time with my kids.
That's awesome, man. And
my wife, of course.
And your wife, of course, who's a saint because she was apparently pregnant for like 5 years straight.
Yeah, and she had rough pregnancies. So like my wife's awesome, and I probably don't tell her that enough, but she is awesome, and she deals with these little Hellcats. Sometimes I get out of the house and go do my own thing, and she's dealing with them. And yeah, she is a saint.
That's amazing. I have one follow-up question about that. When you were reverse engineering your life of like, all right, I got to get to this much passive income in order to retire. Did you always have a number in mind? Did you cut expenses to the bone? Did you replace one part of like, all right, I got to replace my car payment. Now I got to replace my mortgage payment. Now I got to replace my grocery and cell phone payment. Or like, how did you kind of reverse engineer that? Because I've got some ideas of how much it costs me to live a month. And I could probably, if I really wanted to have more financial freedom, cut that number dramatically. But what were the steps that you took to get there? To say, here's the number I need, here's the expenses I have. Like, what was there any insights there, or did it just kind of happen and evolve over time?
Yeah, I mean, I used to have a really tight monthly budget, before I got married, because after I got married, then you got another person, you're dealing with their spending. So I've never really had like a really tight budget since I've been married, because I've just learned that that's not great for my marriage, is, to bicker over dollars and cents all the time.
Right.
Even though I sometimes still do that, but I probably shouldn't. But to answer your question, I mean, when I first started the journey, my expenses were fairly low. So I just wanted to get to $1 million. I said, if I get to $1 million and I can, produce 5% of that a year, I'm financially independent.
So
50 grand a year.
So you
I'm young and
wanted
single. I'm good.
you wanted $1 million of assets to spin off 5%, 50,000
I wanted
net
$1 million net worth.
Got it.
To spin off 5%, to have $50,000 a year, to be financially independent. And then, and then that number was not enough. And I was like, okay, 2 million. And then I hit that and I was like, cool, I want more. And then it was another number, and there was another number. And now I have, 4 kids and a wife. So that number is higher. I'm still financially independent, but that net worth number is a lot higher now.
Right.
And I'm still financially independent, but I still don't feel like I'm like flush with cash.
Right.
Because I have a lot, I'm asset rich, but the cash flow is good, but it's, our expenses are a lot higher. So I don't feel like I'm swimming in cash or anything, but, I feel like I could, if I had to, sell it all and invest it in a, high dividend paying ETF fund and still live off of that, and I'd be fine.
Yeah. Amazing. And final closing question, because this is a great way to get to know somebody. And I keep meaning to like lead with this question, but we always seem to end with this question. Favorite movie and why? You can learn. I'm a big movie junkie, so you can learn a lot about people with their favorite movies and why.
Man, I have a few in my few top. I mean,
go for it. You hit them all.
This one. Okay. Well, I love the movie Das Boot because I'm a big World War II buff. And that movie is just so intense. And I love seeing like war movies from like the other point of view, like the enemy's point of view. And I think that like German movies are really cool. Like that movie Clint Eastwood did where he showed like the Japanese side of Iwo Jima, their point of view. I forgot what it was called. That was an awesome movie. And of course I'd say Braveheart, it's just like
epic movie.
I mean, it's just an awesome movie. Godfather 2, is an incredible movie. What other one can I think of that like many people?
Interesting trivia for you. Godfather 1 and Godfather 2 are the only movies in history where 2 different actors won an Oscar or got nominated for an Oscar for playing the same role. So Robert De Niro and Marlon Brando got nominated for Oscars for playing the same role, just at different points in their life. And Godfather 2 is, to me, one of the most epic, like, origin stories. I feel like all the superhero origin stories can take their cues from Godfather 2, and it'll be a masterful movie.
Oh man, it's just such a good movie. I could watch those movies, and I'm not a Godfather 3 hater. I like Godfather 3.
I like it's good.
It's not as good as the other 2, but like I liked it.
Yeah. I like it because it talks about church corruption, and they, they're hanging out in a high rise in New York. I'm totally fine with Godfather 3. It's just not Godfather 2.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Andy, what's his last name?
Garcia.
Andy Garcia. He's actually one of my best friend's dad is like really close friends with Andy Garcia. So he comes to New Orleans and hangs out and stuff sometimes.
Nice.
But
big cigar smoker.
I mean,
also.
Those are some of my favorite ones. Scarface is incredible too. So
great movie. Yeah, it's
those
funny.
are guy movies that my wife does not care about seeing those movies.
Of course
I'm like,
not.
You have to watch these movies. She's never seen Scarface.
She could care less.
Never seen Goodfellas. Never seen The Godfathers. Doesn't care.
You got to make her
never
watch
seen
Godfather.
Star Wars.
Yeah. Oh, see, proof that I film at the house. Can you say hi?
Hey guys.
All right. He said, hey, go inside. I'm almost done with the podcast. Okay. All right, go inside. Get ready for a hike.
How old are they?
No, he's not really in the ocean. That's just the background. All right, we'll go on a hike in 5 minutes, guys. They're 3 and 5, about to turn 4 and 6, and all they care about is going on hikes in the afternoon with Dad after jiu-jitsu.
That's awesome, man.
Pretty good stuff.
That's good stuff.
Since you're a big World War II buff, there's a book that came out a few years ago called the World Wars or the Wars of World War II. It's by Victor David Hansen. It's a great book about not necessarily individual battles or like the human sacrifice, which I think a lot of World War II books center around. It really plays on all the logistics. And, like we gave 30,000 planes to Russia. And the idea that we could just outproduce Germany and put a bunch of planes that we built in like Michigan on a train to California or to Alaska to put on a boat to go over to Russia to just give them planes to fight, Nazi Germany. It's a crazy book to read because you read about the logistical insanity of World War II, and it's a fascinating book. It's one of the best World War II books I've read. It's by Victor David Hanson. I think it's the only book that he's written on the topic, and well worth the 600-page read or whatever it is. I listened to it on
I have
Audible.
to read that because I'm a huge fan of his.
Yeah,
so,
me too.
I need to read it. Yeah, the logistic and the fact of what that generation did. I just don't think our generation could do that. I just honestly don't. I don't know if Americans today would produce like that, would get off their butts and go to the factory and work like they did in that generation. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe if they had to, I don't know. Maybe if we were invaded, but I don't know if we would for an overseas war. I really don't.
Yeah, I would hope so, but I'm with you that I think it would have to take something drastic. So
yeah.
Cool, man. Well, Kurt, I really appreciate you being on the podcast, dude. I'm going to go for a hike with the kids and you get home to your kids and tuck them in for the night or whatnot. But maybe we'll have you on later in the year as hopefully New Orleans reopens and you acquire some more properties and we'll talk again.
Yeah, that was fun. It was fun, Scott. I appreciate it, man. It was awesome. Great talking to you.
I appreciate you, dude. Later.
All right, buddy. Have a good one.
All right, cool.